I always believed that blood was thicker than water, that no matter what happened, family would always come first. I thought my sister felt the same way, until the lawyer read our father's will. That's when I realized she had planned this all along. When our father passed away, it was devastating. He was the foundation of our family, the one who had built everything from the ground up. His business, his estate, his entire fortune. It was all the result of years of hard work. And he always made it clear that when the time came, everything would be split equally between us. That's what I believed. That's what I was promised. So when the lawyer sat us down in his office to go over the will, I wasn't worried. No, I should have been. Because as soon as the reading began, then something felt off. The numbers weren't adding up. The assets that were supposed to be shared, they were suddenly transferred to my sister's name. The lawyer kept reading, his voice even and professional, as if he hadn't just dropped a bomb on my entire existence. And my sister? She just sat there, calm, expressionless, like she had been expecting this all along, like she knew. And at that moment, I knew too. She had done something. She had stolen what was mine. But what she didn't know? The will had a shocking clause she wasn't expecting. And by the time I was done, she would regret everything. I left the lawyer's office feeling like I'd just been punched in the gut. The will had been changed. My father, the man who always believed in fairness, had supposedly left nearly everything to my sister, and barely anything for me. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be right. But as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, a sinking realization settled in. She did this. She had manipulated something, tampered with something. There was no other explanation. And I was going to find out exactly how she did it. I replayed the past few months in my head, searching for any detail that I had missed. And then it hit me. My sister had suddenly taken a very keen interest in Dad's affairs before he passed. At the time, it didn't seem strange. She always positioned herself as the responsible one, the one who handled the serious matters while I was too emotional. She made it look like she was helping. Dad wants me to take care of the paperwork. You don't have to stress over this. I've got it under control. The lawyers just need a few signatures, nothing major. I had believed her. I had trusted her. And now I was paying for that trust. I started by going through my father's old documents, the ones she didn't have access to. Bank statements, property records, a few old legal papers. And then I found it. Tucked away in a locked drawer of my father's desk, there was a copy of his original will. The one he had made years ago, the one that was fair. Everything was split equally. I stared at the document, my heart pounding. If this was the original, then how did the final version become so different? There was only one answer. She changed it. I needed more. A paper trail, proof that something had been altered. I went back to the lawyer's office the next day and asked to see a copy of the final will, the one that had been read to us. I expected them to hesitate, but they didn't. They handed it over without question. And that's when I saw it. The final will had been signed at a time when my father was already too sick to handle legal matters, a date that didn't make sense. I remembered that week clearly. My father was in the hospital, barely conscious. There was no way he had walked into a lawyer's office and signed a new will, which meant someone else had done it for him. My hands trembled as I flipped through the document. Then something else caught my eye. The witness signatures. I recognized one of the names immediately. It was one of my sister's closest friends. Someone who had everything to gain by helping her to pull this off. The other? A random name. A person I had never heard of. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just manipulation. This was fraud. I could have confronted her right then. I could have stormed into her house, thrown the documents in her face, demanded answers. But why warn her? Why give her time to spin another lie? If I wanted justice, I needed to be smart. So instead, I went to my own lawyer. I laid everything out. My father's original will, the suspicious timeline, the forged signatures. His expression turned grim as he flipped through the papers. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, your sister didn't just tamper with a will. She committed a felony. This is legally binding fraud. I swallowed hard. I had expected her to be greedy, but I hadn't expected her to break the law to get what she wanted. I had a choice to make. I could go public with the evidence now, expose her, drag her through a legal battle, and fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Or I could wait for the perfect moment, because something told me my sister wasn't done yet. She had fought this hard to steal everything. She wouldn't just stop now. And if I played this right, she would walk straight into her own downfall. I had everything I needed, the original will, the forged signatures, the timeline that made no sense. I could have walked into my sister's house that night, thrown the evidence in her face, and watched her scramble for an excuse. But that wasn't enough. She had spent months, maybe even years, carefully crafting this scheme. She had lied, manipulated, and stolen from her own family. If I wanted to take her down, I needed to be smarter than her. And I needed to be patient. Step 1, letting her think she won. The first thing I did was nothing. I didn't call her, I didn't argue, I didn't let her see even a flicker of suspicion on my face. Instead, I played my role perfectly. I let her gloat, I let her act as though everything had gone exactly the way she wanted. This was what Dad wanted, she told me over dinner a few nights later, swirling wine in her glass like some kind of villain in a movie. He knew I was the responsible one. You wouldn't have been able to handle his estate properly. I smiled, nodded, acted like I believed every word. She had no idea that while she was busy celebrating her stolen victory, I was working behind the scenes to take it all away from her. Step 2, bringing in the lawyer. The next morning I scheduled a meeting with my own attorney. I handed him the documents, both wills, the signatures, and the evidence of forgery. He studied them for a long moment before leaning back in his chair. "This is fraud," he said flatly. "Your sister could go to prison for this." I already knew that. "What do we do?" I asked. "We need to challenge the will," he said. "But not just that. We need to take this to probate court. If we prove that the will was forged, not only will the assets be redivided fairly, but your sister could be looking at serious legal consequences." I exhaled slowly. I'd expected a fight, but now it was clear. I wasn't just taking back what was mine. I was about to ruin her. Step 3, the courtroom showdown. 2 weeks later, we stood in probate court. I could feel my sister's eyes burning into me from across the room. She was still confident, still smug. She had probably convinced herself that I was grasping at straws, that the judge would dismiss my case and let her keep everything she had stolen. She had no idea what was coming. Because when my lawyer stood up and presented the original will, the entire courtroom went silent. The judge's brow furrowed. "This is a signed and notarized will dated 6 months before the final version," my lawyer explained. "You'll notice that this version splits the assets equally, while the newer version heavily favors one beneficiary." The judge glanced over at my sister. "Ms. Thompson," he said, his voice neutral but firm, "can you explain this discrepancy?" I turned to look at her, for the first time in weeks. She looked nervous. Step 4, the moment. It all falls apart. She stammered, tried to come up with a lie, tried to claim that Dad changed his mind before he passed away. But then my lawyer slid the final piece of evidence across the table, the witness signatures. "Your Honor," my lawyer said, "we have strong reason to believe that the final will was tampered with. Not only does the timeline not match up, but one of the witnesses, who was supposed to verify my client's father signing the document, was a close friend of Ms. Thompson." The judge's expression darkened. "Ms. Thompson, are you aware that forging a will is a felony?" She went pale. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, because she knew. She was caught. The courtroom was dead silent. Then whispers. Murmurs. The judge shuffled some papers, his face unreadable. "Ms. Thompson," he said again, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" She swallowed hard. "Your Honor, I didn't mean for this to happen," she stammered. I was just following Dad's wishes." Lies. Her voice shook. She looked around the room as if searching for someone to back her up, but there was no one. Even our relatives, some of whom had initially believed her, sat there in stunned silence. One of our aunts gasped. Someone else muttered, "Unbelievable." She wasn't just losing the case. She was losing the respect of everyone around her. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. The forged will was dismissed. The assets were divided fairly. And my sister? She lost everything. Not just the money, not just the house. She lost her reputation, her credibility, and, as a final twist of fate, she was now under criminal investigation for fraud. She begged me, pleaded, "Please, I didn't mean for it to go this far." I just wanted what was best for us. You can't let them send me to jail. But I just looked at her and shook my head. You did this to yourself. And with that, I turned around and walked away, without looking back. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months. For so long I had carried the weight of betrayal, the anger, the disbelief that my own sister could do something like this. But now she was the one carrying the burden, and it was one she couldn't escape. News of the trial spread quickly through our family. Relatives who had once defended her believed her lies, now saw the truth. No one wanted to be associated with her. She tried reaching out, sending messages, pretending it was all just a misunderstanding. But no one responded. The woman who had once manipulated her way to the top of our father's legacy was now an outcast. She wasn't welcome at family gatherings. People whispered when she walked into a room, and when she tried to act like nothing had happened, they ignored her. Because no matter how much she tried to move on, there was one thing she couldn't change. Her name was forever tied to fraud, and in our family, betrayal was never forgotten. But the damage wasn't just social, it was financial. The court froze her accounts while the investigation into her fraud continued, and with her assets seized and her reputation in ruins, she had no choice but to sell her house to cover her legal fees. The same house she had stolen from me. Irony, isn't it? She had fought so hard to take everything, only to end up with nothing. Even worse, she couldn't find another job. Every company she applied to saw her name in the headlines. Convicted of estate fraud. Under investigation for will forgery. No one wanted to hire someone who had stolen from her own family. And so, she moved away. No one knows where she ended up. And no one cared to ask. A month after the ruling, she called me. I almost didn't pick up. But curiosity got the best of me. Hey, can we talk? Her voice was quiet, hesitant. I let the silence stretch. I don't think there's much left to say, I finally replied. Please, she sighed. I don't know what to do. I lost everything. There it was. Not an apology. Not a single acknowledgement of what she had done. Just self-pity. And I had no patience for it. You did this to yourself, I said simply. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. I cut her off. You meant to steal from me. You meant to manipulate Dad's will. You meant every single lie you told. Silence. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. I just want my family back, she whispered. I closed my eyes, shaking my head. You don't betray family and expect them to take you back, I said. And then I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her. Not because I hated her, not because I wanted revenge, but because I'd finally learned something important. Some people are better left behind. I moved forward, built a life without the shadow of her greed looming over me. I got my inheritance back, but I also got something more valuable. Peace. Because the truth is, it was never about the money. It was about what it represented. My father's legacy, my future, my right to what he had built. She had tried to steal that from me, but in the end, she stole from herself. She spent so much time plotting, lying, manipulating, so obsessed with getting everything, she never stopped to think about what would happen if she got caught. And now she had nothing. No job, no home, no family left to support her. She had spent years chasing money, and in the end, it cost her everything. And the worst part? She had no one to blame but herself. For a long time, I thought I needed revenge. I thought I needed to see her suffer, to watch her lose everything the way she tried to take everything from me. But as time passed, I realized something. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. She didn't lose because of me. She lost because greed always catches up to you. Betrayal has consequences. People like my sister think they can take and take without ever facing consequences. She thought she was smarter than everyone. She thought she could forge a will, manipulate our family, and get away with it. But the thing about betrayal? It doesn't just ruin one relationship, it ruins all of them. She didn't just lose the inheritance. She lost the respect of everyone who once cared about her, because money can be replaced. Trust? Once it's broken, it's gone forever. The greedy always lose in the end. Some people will do anything for money. They lie. They cheat. They stab their own family in the back. But here's the truth about greedy people. They never win. Even when they think they've won, they end up losing in ways they never expected. My sister could have had half of everything. We could have worked together, honored our father's wishes, and moved forward as a family. But that wasn't enough for her. She wanted it all. And because of that, she ended up with nothing. Some people aren't meant to stay in your life. For a long time, I struggled with guilt. She was my sister. We shared a childhood, a lifetime of memories. But the person I grew up with, the person I once trusted, was gone. The woman who sat across from me in that courtroom, lying through her teeth trying to steal what wasn't hers. That wasn't my sister. That was a stranger. And I had to accept something painful. Some people, even family, aren't meant to stay in your life. And that's okay. Because when someone chooses to betray you, you have every right to walk away and never look back. Moving forward without regret. She reached out a few more times after that last call. A text here, a voicemail there, always the same message. I miss you. Can we fix this? I just want my family back. But it was never, I'm sorry. It was never I did something wrong. And that's how I knew. She hadn't changed. She wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was looking for a way back in. A way to manipulate me one last time. So I ignored the messages. I moved forward, and I never looked back. Final thought. In the end, I didn't need revenge. The universe took care of that for me. I didn't need to make her suffer. She did that all on her own. And me? I learned something far more valuable than money. I learned that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Because at the end of the day, the best thing you can do for yourself is cut the toxic people out of your life, no matter who they are. But what about you? Have you ever been betrayed by family? Did you fight back or did you walk away? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story.